Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Jon Andersen, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience today. I told you before we hit record, I barely slept last night. I am so pumped up. I'm so ready to go. Like I could run through a wall right now, dude. Okay, so real quick, like we talked about before we hit record, everybody's got a story.
Yep.
Our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born all the way up to today, and then let's talk about what you're working on today and or tomorrow, okay?
Absolutely.
Well, being here, bud.
Absolutely. Well, first thing I want to say is, as we tell my story, one thing I always like to remind people, that I mentor and coach is that people have a story about why they're successful or why they're not successful. So basically, my story is why I'm successful. But when you hear me tell it from the beginning, I wasn't given all the tools I needed, and
Right.
I had to basically, let's just get it on. So,
Well, it's like a reel, right? It's like a tape that runs in their head. And what we have to do is we have to figure out a way to help them interrupt that pattern. Interrupt that tape, okay? And form a new one.
Yes, and here's the thing. Before I start, the last thing I want to say that's going to make all this connect before I start my story is that, and it's the same for me and for all of you listening out there, life happened for me, not to me.
That's it.
And because life happened for me in this very difficult regard, I am who I am today.
Yeah.
Had this stuff not happened, I would probably be, who knows, I'd be a damn cashier somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's healthy. Okay. It's healthy to look back on your past and realize, you know what? We're connecting the dots here. This actually happened because this had to happen.
Yes.
And then this happened.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's kind of
exactly.
It's like I always talk about Tony Robbins because I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, but Tony talks about his childhood. He had a rough time. He had a really rough childhood.
That's what helped him. Absolutely.
But he thanks his childhood.
Yes.
Thanks his mom in particular, who's not with us anymore, right? For that, for doing what she did, because it made him into the guy he is today. And so
100%.
That's the
100%.
Yeah.
So I was basically, I was born 1972, January 8th in San Francisco.
Okay.
And I had a loving mother. I wasn't abused. It wasn't like I was, there was none of that stuff going on.
Yeah.
I was mentally challenged in the regards that I had a really, really difficult time learning. And in those days, they didn't really identify that. They just said, oh, the kid's slow. Let's put him over here. Yeah. Well, and so basically through the first part of my schooling, all the first, first through fourth, fifth grade, I was basically, in those days, you kind of had a teacher. You just went to the same classroom, and it was a small school. And by the time I got to fifth grade, I had learned so little. I mean, I was like, literally, we ended up moving, changed schools. They tested me to figure out where I was going to go. I spent and this is sixth grade now, I spent half of my days in what the school called the resource room, what the kids called the retard room, because there were kids in there that were like, literally like I challenged with learning. They had challenges beyond what I had, but that was just across the room. So I was reading, I don't know, probably about a first grade level. And so it was just the fact that nobody really understood I wasn't retaining. I was going through the motions. And so long and short of it is that through my lack of retention with reading and all the other things, I was like the little engine who couldn't. And It wasn't like I was not trying. It just, everybody was just bouncing off. And so anyway, through the course of, this prompted, basically the bullying and the be getting picked on and stuff like that. And when I was earlier, I was actually a fairly bigger kid at that point. So I was actually pretty good at fighting back. But then on top of this learning disability, I just stopped growing. And it was just my DNA. It was, my dad was the same way. It's just, I didn't hit puberty till I was 17 years old. So I went through this phase of like, being, first I was kind of like the bigger kid that was the dummy. Then I was the little fat kid that was the dummy. Because at that point now I'm running to food. Food is my comfort. I get, somebody spits on my face on the bus ride to school, I'm dumping my lunch money on donuts before the school day starts. Because I'm hiding in food. That was my go-to. And so as the little engine who couldn't, I struggled. I had social issues, I had anxiety issues, I had learning issues. The list goes on, but this is not a pity party. This is just to kind of paint the picture that I didn't start off with the tools that you would think I had to get where I am today with what I'm doing and what I've done. Yeah. And somewhere along the lines, I realized that I had been working so hard to keep my head just above water. Mm-hmm. And I started to realize that, hey, you apply this hard work to certain things and you're actually making a lot of progress. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the classroom. Right. But I soon realized that, it was my mother, very loving mother. She kept me very busy. I basically played 3 sports a year. I did a lot of bench warming, but I was still practicing and whatnot. And I started to realize that I was actually really good at the weightlifting, which was basically the preparation for the sports I was playing. And back in where I went to school, back in those days, if you played sports, you had to lift weights for your PE. It was their method of, helping the athletes. And so I quickly realized, by the time I'm a junior in high school, granted, I'm still, I'm a junior and I'm in freshman math, but, I'm barely getting by. Yeah. But all of a sudden I'm the second strongest kid as a junior in high school. Now, that didn't really help me much with the challenges I was having, but the light bulb went off that, hey, you taught yourself to work hard enough. You've been reading everything 2-3 times, for me to get a C was like an A. My mom was so happy when I'd bring home C's because that was, for me, she saw how hard I was working. Anyway, so I quickly realized that I was much better at lifting weights than the sports that I was playing. And I fell in love with it because it's what it was doing. I didn't understand then why I fell in love, but looking back, it's really easy to see. It was building the confidence. It was building the self-esteem. I was finally good at something.
Well, you were making progress at something, right? And that's a big deal. That's a big lesson for people to learn, right?
Yes. And I was, for the first time in my life, I'm not at the last. I'm at the front of the line. Right. I'm like, there's only one guy in the school that's stronger than you right now. Yeah. This is like, so off I went. And it was kind of in that transition where I realized that I had developed this work ethic that a lot of the other kids didn't have because things came easier for them. They only had to work so hard to get that A or B, as to where I was working 2-3 times as hard to get the C. Yeah. And then with my love of lifting weights, and then I really started to work hard because I was actually seeing the benefits of how it was changing my confidence and changing my status within. I got a date for, my goodness, I was, it was like girls started to like me. Holy smoke, let's keep lifting these weights, Right. And so anyway, and so at that point, that was kind of the turning point where I recognized that the work ethic that I had developed was and at that point I didn't really translate that much into the future, other than I just wanted to be this big, strong dude. That was the only thing I was good at. So I basically graduated high school, and I'll be honest, I had figured out a way. I hate to use the word cheat, but truthfully, there was some cheating going on to get through my schooling, where I would it wasn't like I was just sitting there looking at somebody else's stuff, but I was like, I would be kind of seeking the right person to kind of help me know what to do exactly. So I wasn't really learning, if that makes sense, you know, kind of. So anyway, I'd found a method of getting through school, and I made it all the way through the University of Portland with a major in theology and minor in philosophy. Wow. And yeah, now keep in mind that was just kind of happened because I was just taking classes. You know, my father chaplain was my advisor at that point. It was a small Catholic school. So those days I went and sat down in his office, and he was just kind of like, let's do this. He knew my challenges. I was honest with him. And so end of junior year, he goes, you got to declare. I said, well, Father, what am I closest to? He goes, well, if you do this right, you're going to get a major in theology, a minor in philosophy. Let's go. Yeah. And so, you know, the good part about some of those upper classes was there was lots of discussions, you know, and I retained those discussions well. I wasn't retaining well the information out of the books. Right. And I mean,
you're more auditory than visual.
Yes. And so what I figured out, and then when I say cheat, I'm really kind of giving myself a shot when I shouldn't be saying cheat, because at this point it had turned into problem solving, which was another humongous gift that my disability had given me, because I figured out once I got out of the easy classes in the very beginning, I realized, holy smokes, this is the heat. It's heating up here. Yeah. You know, so I developed this method where I would get my classes. I would basically go to each professor individually. I'd say, okay, please tell me what percentage of the grade is in the book and what is in the lecture. Mm-hmm. And if he told me 80% was in the lecture, I was good. I never bought a book in college. I couldn't read them. It was like, well, I could read them. I just didn't know what they were telling me. Right. Right. You know, I can read it and it sounds like everything's fine, but it's just not sticking up here, you know? So anyway, so I realized that if a professor told me that, hey, you know, 40% is from the book, well, then I realized that I needed to find someone in that class that was going to help me get the information out of that book so I could pass. Gotcha. So my problem solving skills, and this is at this point, we've definitely converted from cheating to problem solving. Right. You know, and when I say cheating, you know, it was kind of a fringe thing, you know. It makes a good sound for the story though, you know. So
there's tutoring and there's cheating. Okay. Yeah. It sounds like you were right in between the two, you know.
I was toggling, man. Toggling. Sometimes I had to do what I had to do.
Okay, but you got to think about this for a second. Okay. And I get that you're hard on yourself because you're a champion, dude. It's what champions do. Okay. We're harder on ourselves than not that I'm a champion, but champions are harder on themselves than they are on anybody else. Yeah. The thing about it is you figured out a way to solve the problem. Even back when the problem had to be solved. Right. Yes. I know you're calling it cheating, but you had to figure out a way to get through. Okay. Yes. That is a real lesson in life.
Yes.
Because you could have refused to do that and never graduated high school, right? Yeah. You could have just said, all right, it's not for me, you know, this learning thing's not right. But instead of doing that, you figured out a way through. And then you figured out that you were auditory versus visual. So now you're in college and you're like, okay, I've got a system now. Yeah. See, that's the kind of thing that people listen to your story. Yes. And they may have dyslexia. They may have you know, any number of learning disabilities, that kind of thing. I mean, I have ADHD on steroids.
Yeah, I'm with you there, brother. Right? And my dyslexia still kicks my butt. Yeah. I'll see the word was, but it'll say saw. Those two letters just flip-flop. Yeah. You know, so you're correct. I mean, I use the word cheat as being hard on myself, but I guess the better way to put it was I had to resource outside what was kind of set within the school system for me to get through.
Yeah, the most important thing was you figured it out.
Yes.
Right? Instead of quitting, right?
100%.
You figured out a way over the wall, okay? Or through the wall or under the wall, whatever it meant, around the wall. It doesn't matter, right? The fact of the matter is you got to where you needed to go. The system didn't identify what it was that you were dealing with, but you did, and you figured out a way to solve the problem. And that's something to be, I mean, there's something admirable there when you're a teenager and you haven't even hit puberty yet, and you're trying to figure out a way to survive in a system that, let's be honest, isn't necessarily working in your favor. Okay.
Yeah. Well, in those days, there was no system for slow kids. It was push them to the side. You know.
By the way, you were born 2 years to the day after my sister was born. You were born on.
Right on.
Yep.
Right on.
So you and her and Elvis Presley all share.
I was going to say we share the day with Elvis.
Pretty cool.
So my problem solving skills by the time I'm in the back half of college in the 300 and 400 classes was razor sharp, because I very clearly knew I understood what I was doing. You know, when I was younger, I was just flopping around trying to figure out how to prepare for a test. Now the system was in play, and I was actually passing classes without those C's. I was actually getting, for the first time, I'd gotten myself into more of a B type status. And so I graduated college, and, you know, it's like, I've got this skill set, and with my degree, I mean, the only thing I could really do was go be a priest, which obviously at that point, you know, I'd already made up my mind that I wanted to be this big, strong guy, and I wanted to figure out a way to monetize it. At the time, I wanted to be a pro bodybuilder. Yeah. And so there was a small period of time where I was going to take over a family business. And because that was really just allowed me to have financial stability so I could continue to lift weights, to chase my dream. That's all that was.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know, a lot of times with the father-son relationship changes into business, it didn't work. Yeah. And so at that point, you know, again, my problem solving skills just start working for me. So I just became I started basically creating little businesses. And, you know, I had no intention of graduating college and going and get a job. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that there was something more for me, and it was all centered around being a big, strong guy. I didn't quite understand how I was going to monetize it, but I knew I was happy in that pursuit.
Well, so I ended up laid the groundwork here, right?
Yeah.
You laid the foundation for, we're going to just flip and solve it. We're going to figure it out. However it is, we need to figure it out, right? So I don't know if you've read Schwarzenegger's autobiography, but I did. And I love the fact that every time he turned around, he was up against something. Every time he turned around, another challenge. Every time he turned around, it was, oh, no, you can't do that. I mean, even his dad, right? Even his dad is like, no, you're not doing that. You're going to follow in my footsteps. You're going to do right. And, you know, in Austria, let's be honest, you follow in people's footsteps, right?
Yeah.
This guy was a rebel without a cause, but he continued to focus on that dream and continued to figure out ways around it. It didn't matter if it was in London. It didn't matter if it was in California. It didn't matter where it was. He just figured out a way to make it work. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, that I absolutely love about your story. So let me ask you a couple of real quick questions. Growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
You're going to have to go right back to Arnold. The first time I saw what happened was when I was a kid, I didn't have TV because my mom was smart enough to understand that, you know, watching television was not going to help my cause.
Right.
So we didn't have a TV in the house until I started playing football, when they told us our homework was to watch Monday Night Football. That was the first time we got a TV. And then it was in the closet except for Monday Night Football. Well, in that process, of course, you get a little glances here and there. And I saw the movie Conan the Barbarian for the first time. And
you did.
I had never seen anything like that before. And it was like something in my chest just moved. Yeah. And it was like, whatever that was, it did this and it never went back. Yeah. And it was like my purpose as a human being had been changed. My path had been redirected, and that is still there.
Yeah. That's so cool. That is so cool. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So, and by the way, shout out to your mom. Okay. Because she could have very well been a TV addict. Yeah. Right.
Oh yeah.
She could have very well left that there to distract you. Right. She's part of the reason you got through all this.
You know, and brother, on that level, when I would come home, this was me in elementary school. I would come home with homework, right? I would get home on Friday and I would literally go straight to our dining room table and start working on my homework, which usually would take me most of the weekend to get done.
Yeah.
And my mom, most of the time, was sitting right next to me, supporting me. She'd do it. She wasn't doing my work for me, that's for sure, because it would have been done real quick.
Yeah.
But she not only didn't have a TV presence, she literally was actively by my side, helping me through the situation. When I say helping, a lot of times it was just a lot of moral support, because she knew that I needed to learn to figure some of this out by myself.
Well, think about this for a second. There were probably millions of times while you were growing up that you just got so frustrated you wanted to quit. And she's right there by your side going, look, I know it's a challenge. I know you've got some sort of challenges here, right? But you got to press on. You got to, right?
Yeah.
You mind if I tell you a real quick story?
Please.
So growing up, my mother had incredibly high standards for me, right? I was supposed to be an attorney and all this stuff, right? I mean, they had all these plans for me. And there were times when I would get frustrated and I would want to quit, I'd get frustrated. I'd be emotional, right? Well, that wasn't acceptable. That wasn't acceptable for her son. And so her son needed to pull himself up by the bootstraps. If I heard that once, I heard it 100,000 times, it seemed like, right? It wasn't that many times, but you know what I mean, right? Years later, my mother calls me up and she says, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I just don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, well, you're just going to have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm not sure she liked the fact that her advice from all those years ago was coming
circled back around, man.
Come home to roost, baby. It's as good as it gets, right?
That's good stuff. Well, funny crazy. with my mother, the funny thing, I'm the youngest of three. Yeah. And my older brothers were smart. Yeah. So I'm sure she's just like, what the hell happened to this one? Because there was, the brother, the middle brother, he went to Berkeley. As an engineer. And so somehow, some way, she ended up having the third one was the challenge, and she did exactly what she needed to do to put us all on course.
But she recognized the challenge. Okay.
Yeah.
And she got in there with you in the trenches and helped you get through it. See, you learned your problem solving skills from whom? Your mom.
Yeah.
Okay. She figured out a way to help you get through it. And you modeled that your entire life.
Brother, I'll tell you, my mother, I am the biggest, and I mean biggest, mama's boy on the planet. I love my mother so much. Yeah. It's like she's like my hero, because all those times when it was so dark and cold in my world, I could feel her warmth just sitting to my side. And that right there, probably exactly what you said. It was that was the foundation of everything.
Yeah, we talk about parenting a lot on this podcast. And part of it is we talk about business. We talk about success. We talk about leverage. We talk about leadership. Parenting, as far as I'm concerned, is sacred leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no greater role you have than being a parent as a leader, right?
Yeah.
And if you look, the really good parents are exceptional leaders, and vice versa. Okay.
Yep.
And so I feel like it's incredibly important that people understand it wasn't what your mom said. It was what she did.
Okay? Yeah. So listen, for all those parents listening,
don't do what I say. Don't do what I did. Do what I say. Right,
brother. That's what I teach in my mentoring. Is listen, your kids do not listen to what you say. They watch what you do.
That's it.
You can tell them whatever. They're not going to do what you ask them to do. They're going to do what you're doing. So if you're doing, they're going to do it. You're doing. They're going to do the same dumb shit.
They're going to model you.
100%.
And they're sponges, dude. They're absolute sponges. Okay.
Yes.
So my son's 25. He's our oldest. Years ago, he was 2-ish, right? And he would ride in the car with his mother. And I called these kids road warriors because my wife at the time was running all over San Diego County. I mean, thousands of miles every month in her car with them in the back, running documents for me. I was one of the top producing lenders in the nation, and I had way too much going on. And so she was trying to help me get through my day, right? Because I didn't have time to do all this. So she would run and gun with the kids. Okay. Well, apparently when she was driving, she used a phrase called, "Hey lady, pick a lane." So my son is 2. She's pregnant with our next baby, right? Our son is almost 2. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.